As we've been telling you the stories of people who have Alzheimer's, people who fear they might get it, people relying on the latest research, and people doing that research, you have no doubt asked yourself these questions. How do I know if I have it? And how do I know if I don't? And what's considered just normal aging, otherwise known as age-related changes in one's memory? According to the Alzheimer's Association, one of the most common signs of a problem, memory loss that disrupts your daily life, forgetting important dates or events, asking the same questions over and over, relying on memory aids or family for things that you used to do on your own. It's okay if you forget a name or an appointment, but remember it later. That's considered typical age-related change and not the beginnings of Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia. Another common sign, especially in its early stages, forgetting learned information like important dates or events or the ability to retrace steps. And that's important since a person living with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia may put things in unusual places. If you misplace things from time to time, but successfully retrace your steps to find those things, that's considered age-related memory change and not Alzheimer's. If you have trouble creating or following a plan, you may have trouble following a familiar recipe or keeping track of monthly bills, but making an occasional error managing money or household bills is considered typical age-related memory change. Decreased or poor judgment. For example, some people with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia may make poor decisions dealing with money or paying less attention to personal grooming. But making a bad decision once in a while is considered typical age-related change. And here's one more. This is a big one. Confusion with time or place, losing track of dates, of seasons, even the passage of time. They may have trouble understanding something if it's not happening right away. Sometimes they may forget where they are or how they got there. These are all signs of a possible problem. But getting confused about the day of the week, yet figuring out later, is typical age-related change. If you miss these signs, we have them right now at kmbc.com/answering Alzheimer's. Now we want to update you on the people that you met here tonight. People who say they found answers in important drug trials. People who never found those answers soon enough. And people working every day looking for those answers. But first, the Overland Park woman who worries about developing Alzheimer's and is doing something about it.
Yeah, it is literally mental health for me in so many ways to work out.
Ann Frazier has a family history of dementia.
Oh, Sissy's good at it too. Okay, thank you.
And has tested positive for a gene that increases her chances of getting Alzheimer's. Ann believes regular exercise, a proper diet, proper sleep, and reduced stress will reduce those odds.
I cannot take that chance with my brain to do something that might make it worse. Because I'm trying so hard to make it great.
Yes.
You know?
More than a year after meeting Ann, she says it's working. She points to her most recent brain scan revealing no plaque. Compare that to a scan of someone with Alzheimer's, where you can see the formation of plaque. Ann hosts a podcast on her experience, has set up a support group for people dealing with the same issues, and she holds a gala each year.
I have pre-Alzheimer's.
Where she preaches early detection is key.
There is hope, and there is help.
68-year-old David Welch has spent 6 years taking part in a clinical trial of the Alzheimer's drug Aduhelm.
And in this particular trial, the plaque that had accumulated in your brain had gone away.
Yeah, pretty much.
No longer there?
No longer there.
Wow.
I did 2 different types of PET scans, and in both of them it didn't show up.
David calls the drug a miracle, but questions over how fast the drug was approved by the FDA, how safe it really is, and if it works, led Aduhelm's maker to pull it off the market. Which means the clinical trial that David is in will end in the next few months. As a veteran, he's now hoping he can qualify through the VA for a new drug that just received FDA approval this month. It's called donanemab, and it has been shown to give people with mild or early cases of Alzheimer's more time to live independently. Yet it carries an annual price tag of over $32,000.
The more and more I see, the more and more convinced I am that I'm on the right path.
The research into Alzheimer's continues to develop.
We're exploring a potential cause of Alzheimer's disease, which is energy metabolism.
Dr. Russell Swerdlow of the University of Kansas Medical System is convinced that researchers will not only find a cure one day, but also a way to fix memory damage. And how far away are we from that?
Well, actually, we're probably closer than many people would think. The field is getting a more sophisticated and advanced view of what drives brain aging and what are the consequences of brain aging.
And are those answers 5 years away, 10 years away?
There are some answers that are 5 years away, and there are other answers that are 20 years away. But we'll keep moving forward.
The work also continues at Kansas City's world-renowned Stowers Institute, where science director Kaushik C.
Memory is all about today and tomorrow. This is what defines us.
is still looking for clues in how the brain makes a memory to try and discover how Alzheimer's works.
Every time we create memories, we use some proteins. Proteins are essentially driving every single thing, including memory. However, proteins are made and then they disappear. So the question is then, if we are making a memory with proteins and these proteins are going to disappear after a couple of days, then how the memory is going to survive for years and months.
That's Mom's camera. It's Mom. Mom is touching you. She's behind you.
Oh, okay.
Here, you want to come over here?
As for Chuck Kajinian's Alzheimer journey,
the Alzheimer's journey is probably not the same for any two families.
as the disease progressed and his family could no longer care for him, Chuck started a new chapter at a memory care center.
And move forward and appreciate every day that you have and find the goodness in what he or she still has. And that's what I really have been focusing on, is how lucky we are to have him safe in a place, whether he's cognitively there or not, where he's happy, he's content, and in a way, it's a funny word to use, but he's thriving.
All students are an asshole.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's really about now.
It is.
It's about now.
It's a moment by moment. And like you asked about the future, and it's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of in the back of your mind, but it's really a moment by moment for both Mom and Dad.
On January 27, 2023, Chuck Kajinian passed away peacefully at the age of 93. 7 months later, his beloved wife Darla passed away after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer at the age of 85. We dedicate this KMBC9 Chronicle to the memories of Chuck and Darla Kajinian.